This is Ali Bendelli and Rebecca Jarvis, and we did our presentation on the evolution of language in the African American vernacular. So a bit of an introduction for you. Vernacular and dialect obviously differ in many ways.
Understandably so, vernacular is often confused with dialect because of their overlapping similarities in definition. Vernacular, however, refers to language change as it exemplifies the overall change in words and phrases due to geographical and language influences.
There are hundreds of different languages in the world. However, not every person may speak the same form of one language. Different varieties can form based on the regional and historical influence. Take the English language, for example. I think we can all agree that the way we speak English as Americans and the way Australians and British people speak English have some distinguishing factors. Another form of English is African American English. In our presentation, we will be focusing on the African American vernacular in American English.
Dialect. In comparison to how vernacular focuses on language, dialect refers to linguistics as it exemplifies the differences in speech in different areas of the country. Dialect is the form of a particular language that is spoken in a specific geographical region or spoken by members of a specific socioeconomic class or occupational groups. Similarities and differences. Dialect and vernacular are similar in their definition, as they both define language change for certain groups of people. Vernacular, however, is typically an overall language change defined by historical and geographical influences. Dialect, on the other hand, focuses more on immediate day-to-day circumstances. African American English, or AAE. African American English and Linguistics. Non-standard Negro English, the original term for African American English, was first used in the 1960s after the first modern, large-scale linguistic study of the African American speech communities. In 1973, a group of black scholars who, rightly so, disliked the negative connotation of the term non-standard Negro English, first coined the term Ebonics, which quite literally translates to Black English. The term Ebonics did not catch on until the Ebonics controversy of December 1996, when the Oakland School Board recognized it as the primary language of its majority African American students and resolved to take into account in teaching them standard or academic English. Today, linguists either use the term Ebonics or African American English. African American English emphasizes that this does not include the standard English usage of African Americans. Ebonics is used to emphasize the African roots of African American speech and its connections with languages spoken elsewhere in the Black diaspora.
AAE vernacular origin. The origins of AAE are debatable. One common theory traces the origin of the developed language back to a type of Pidgin. Pidgin is a form of language that has been stripped to the most simplified grammatical form and is used for communication between groups of people that do not share a common language. This developed language was used most commonly during the slave trade era. Slave traders and slave owners would use this language to communicate amongst themselves. Naturally, being surrounded by it, the slaves acquired this Pidgin as well and used it to communicate amongst each other. From this form of Pidgin came Creole, which was spoken by first-generation slaves who were born in North America. In the Carolina Sea Islands, Creole can be heard today spoken by the Gullah and the Geechee peoples. Another popular theory suggests that AAE comes from the retention of British English features that were not preserved in other forms of American English. So what exactly distinguishes AAE from any other vernacular? AAE is distinguished by the phonology, which is the pronunciation, the syntactic patterns, which is the grammar, and the morphological features, which is the inflections, that are also surfaced in other forms of English. These array of features are also commonly shared with the Southern speakers and the Appalachian speakers of North America. So let's just dive into a bit of the phonology. So phonology refers to the pronunciation. One common characteristic is the deletion of certain consonants like R deletions and L deletions. In standard American English, the final R in the word door would be pronounced. However, in AAE, the final R is dropped. Same goes for the L deletions. As you can see in the table, the deletion of L's in contractions like you'll and they'll results in appearance of failure to inflect for the future tense. Another example of deletion is in the final consonant clusters and final dental alveolar stops, the endings such as ed in past, where the D and good are dropped in AAE. In reference to AAE, the deletion of the consonant cluster ED in past versus pass shows a morphological gap in the grammar, meaning that it shows no difference between past and present. Voice dental affricatives become alveolar stops, such as they versus day and them versus dem. Voiceless dental fricatives with a following R turn into voiceless labiodental fricatives. For example, three versus free and throat versus froat. Medial clusters follow a like pattern. Alright, now on to syntactic patterns, which refer to grammar. In terms of auxiliary verb deletion, where standard American English uses contractions, AAE deletes. For example, he's going versus he going. I've got it versus I got it. He'd be happy versus he be happy. Another grammar pattern is using the habitual be. For example, he usually comes home at 6 turns into he be coming home at 6. Another grammar pattern is double or even multiple negation. For example, in one of Eddie Murphy's movies, 48 Hours, one of his lines read as follows: "Neither one of us ain't got nothing to lose." And now finally, morphological features, or in other words, inflections. The use of possessive markers. In standard American English, the possessive marker of apostrophe S is present. For example, Becca's sister. However, in the AAE, there is a lack of possessive marker. For example, Becca, sister. The possession is marked by the possession of the noun and its possessor. The third person singular has no obligatory morphological ending in AAE, so that summer works here is expressed as summer work here.
This is a timeline of the origins and evolution of the African American vernacular. In 1517, African slaves were transported to West Indies by the Spanish. In 1550, West African Pidgin English spoken widely across the entire West Coast. In the early 17th century, European ships began transporting West Africans to the Caribbean and American coasts. After 1625, slaves from West Africa began bringing African languages, lingua francas, and West African Pidgin. By 1700, there are records of a fully developed plantation Creole English. By 1776, 500,000 black slaves are in the U.S. By 1790, 750,000 African Americans are in the U.S. By 1800, plantation Creole English begins undergoing decreolization to separate itself. By 1850, 92% of African Americans live in the South. By 1865, they have the abolition of slavery, and over 4 million slaves are in the U.S. By 1900, migration of the North begins, and African American vernacular begins dispersing. The Black arts had a lot to do with the beginning of the African American vernacular and showcasing it in a more artistic way. This began with the Harlem Renaissance in the early 1900s. This was the beginning of the African American arts movement, which was heavily influenced all arts since. At this time, African American authors were using the African American vernacular to accurately showcase the speech and voice of their people. These authors began a revolution regarding African American arts. This was the first time the African American vernacular was used as a tool to promote black arts rather than a tool to be used against it. This was particularly special because the literary works of these authors went on to be known as some of the greatest literary works to date. The following slides consist of 3 excerpts from very prominent authors during the Harlem Renaissance: Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Langston Hughes' The Weary Blues. I won't read these because of time constraints, but these works are relevant because these authors uphold the African American vernacular in the dialogue of their characters. In reading these materials, one can take note that deletion is heavily used, as one often contains more meaning than the literal translation. The African American vernacular still upholds the syntagmatic change, and we have mimicked this tool in the creation of many modern-day slang words. We chose to include some of the words of the day which have been popularized by African American hip-hop artists. to show how we have incorporated the African American vernacular into our everyday speech and even use it in classwork.
I went to Master Shaw's plantation.
You admit it?
Yes, freely. And you know why? I got this from Mrs. Shaw. Mrs. Epps won't even grab me no soap to clean with. I stink so much I make myself gag. 500 pounds of cotton, day in, day out. More than any man here. And for that I will be clean. That's all I ask. This here, what I went to Shaw's for.
Nothing. What you want? Oh, I need to borrow your car right quick. What kind of shit is that? Most people want to borrow sugar or even ketchup. You want to borrow my car? Hell no. The hell on. Well, let me borrow a joint. You need to borrow a job with your broke ass. Always trying to smoke up somebody's shit. The hell on, Felicia. I'm gonna remember that. Remember it. Write it down. Take a picture. I don't give a fuck. Craig.
Bye, Felicia.
Y'all stingy. You goddamn pest.
Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. All right?
All right.
You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.